Our story begins with a flood in progress, as an unprecedented storm is hitting Louisiana and causing water levels to rise dramatically. Most people have been evacuated already, but several have chosen to stay, including these two random people rushing into an abandoned building for shelter. Not the best place to hold out, but any port in a storm, right? The man, Clarence, is doing what he can to fortify the place, while the woman, Summer, refuses to help and just complains. Suddenly, the door bursts open, and as Clarence tries to fix it, he's yoinked outside by some unseen force. As Summer stares on in confusion of what just happened, a hungry growling alligator enters the building. She doesn't just let it take her as well, however, and to her credit does try to escape before picking up a plank of wood and using it as a weapon. She's even able to take out one of the creature's eyes before it knocks the weapon out of her hands, grabs her by the leg, and does that famous death roll alligators are known for. Game over for her, I guess. But hey, an attempt was made. We now cut to a prison bus as we're introduced to several criminals in transit. There's Big Jim, arrested for drug trafficking and distribution. Jocks, in for armed robbery and vandalism. Floyd, in for murder and various hate crimes. Angelo, in just for murder alone. And Cody, in for cop murder specifically. Lots of killers here apparently. The bus is having difficulties traveling through the storm, so they radio a nearby sheriff's department to request shelter for the night, which they are granted. As they make their detour to that station, however, they are seen and followed by a group of criminals planning a jailbreak for one of the convicts, who are a bit confused by the bus's sudden change of direction, but undaunted nonetheless. They're driving a truck that is hauling a set of jet skis, which I guess they brought in preparation for the flood. Not a bad plan for if and when the roads aren't suitable for cars anymore. Over at said police station, one of the officers is down in the cellar gathering supplies and fixing exposed electrical wires when a couple of alligators enter through what I think are ventilation shafts. Hearing them, he turns to investigate, but drops his flashlight in the process. As he attempts to fish it out of the water, something fishes for him right back and he is quickly dragged under and eaten. Well, that's one down already. The bus now arrives and they begin escorting the convicts inside. After being treated to a completely redundant scene where we are reintroduced to each prisoner one more time, they are placed in their new holding cells. So far so good, minus that one guy in the basement at least. But things are about to go from 0 to 100 as the criminals make their move for the jailbreak. They immediately open fire from outside the station, causing a firefight between them and the few officers inside. Neither side takes any hits though, probably because everyone is just firing blind instead of actually aiming, and eventually the jailbreakers are able to get the upper hand just by having superior numbers. Unfortunately, due to the storm, the radio signals are knocked out and the officers can't call for backup. Not like they could get there very easily anyway with how the weather is, so it looks like they're on their own. One of the officers from the prison bus tries to be a hero, but the fool just stands out in the open and shouts for 5 armed criminals to simply freeze. Yeah, don't attempt to shoot any of them or anything. Just ask nicely for them to give up, why don't you? This goes about as well as you'd think as he takes some buckshot to the chest. His sacrifice wasn't fully in vain, however, as Sheriff Joe is able to capitalize on this distraction and tag one of the attackers in the neck. Nice shot. But now that they are out of ammo and outmatched, the officers surrender themselves and their weapons. Thankfully, the jailbreakers aren't interested in mindlessly killing everyone and just want their compatriot Russell Cody released. As they have one of their men tend to the one with the neck wound, the rest follow the sheriff and deputy to the holding cells. Once there, they tell the other prison bus officer Stamper to forfeit their weapon as well, which he reluctantly does. The leader of the crooks, Rafe, has Cody set free from his cell and puts the remaining officers in there instead. I'm sure the inmates at least are happy to see this role reversal on their captors. Rafe does leave Sheriff Joe out though in order for her to guide a member of the crooks to the surveillance cameras. Smart move. Unfortunately, it's located in that previously mentioned flooded basement and we know what else is waiting for them down there. Or maybe not, as apparently the alligators got tired of waiting and have come up to see what all that commotion was and finish off the wounded criminal before he has time to react. Don't know what's worse, the half-ton killing machines, the gun-toting intruders, or the murderous prisoners. But let's look back and see if anything could have been done differently for this scenario. The bus full of prisoners should never have been traveling in the first place. This storm is causing a statewide emergency according to the news position broadcast in the beginning, and as such, they never should have greenlit transporting dangerous criminals in these conditions. Once on the road though, it was smart to call for a place to use as shelter to avoid the bus crashing or getting stranded in these conditions. Just unfortunate that the nearest place was so small and understaffed for such a situation. In fact, maybe the sheriff should have refused having them all stay if their station wasn't properly equipped to handle that many convicts at once. Of course, they would have had at least one more officer on duty to help if he hadn't become gator food in the basement. But I can't blame him for not seeing that coming, as alligators are typically afraid of humans and are more likely to flee when seeing one than to approach for snack time. Attacks do happen occasionally, of course, but it's more likely when the alligator is cornered and feels threatened, or is defending their territory or nest. But for the purposes of this film, let's suspend our disbelief and assume these are ravenous alligators that are starved and bloodthirsty. So the only other way the officers could have stood a chance against this oncoming assault by the jailbreakers would have been to not waste their bullets by firing randomly until they were out of options. Had they just held out or regrouped into a safer position in the precinct, possibly even hitting up the armory for more ammo and weapons in the process, they could have held the line longer and not had to surrender to begin with. But now that they have, let's see where they go from here and if they can turn things around from this point on. The sheriff takes a single member of the Crook's crew to the basement as promised. Not sure why they would only send a single person with her instead of having the entire group to make sure no funny business happens, but here we are. While in the flooded room, Sheriff Joe checks out a flashlight left on and underwater, only to pull up a severed hand still grasping the device. They soon find the source of this carnage as a one-eyed alligator crawls down the steps after them and enters the water. Guess this is the same one from before that got Sommer. The crook opens a fire on it, but the water protects the beast and hides its exact location, and it eventually chomps down and rolls the attacker. The sheriff uses this opportunity to escape and seal the room, and with it, the woman's fate. But since the creature's trapped in there, that means the crisis is averted, right? Well, not exactly, as the gators find and swim through the comically large ventilation system the police station has. Rafe comes to check on the situation, which again just begs the question of why he didn't go with them to begin with, and finds some of his other crew members' body parts floating in the water. That tells him exactly what they're dealing with. Well, that, and the fact that he soon after sees several alligators chasing the sheriff up the stairs. The first floor of the precinct is now flooded up to everyone's knees. Dang, how did the water level rise that high, that fast? Well, regardless, the alligators are using this to their advantage and swimming towards our characters at high speed. They attempt to regroup in the prisoner room, but Rafe gets dragged out by his leg in the process despite Cody trying to save his life. Have to admit, didn't expect for the Crooks leader to get gator gotten this early in the film. All that remains of the jailbreak group is a lone gunman, who releases the prisoner so they can deal with the sheriff for him. Not sure why he doesn't just use the shotgun he has, but maybe he doesn't want to be held responsible for additional murder charges himself. The inmates are quick to attack Joe, but thankfully do so only one at a time as they underestimate her power. Angelo is first and chokeslams her onto a nearby desk, but she uses an old phone and the prison cell door to knock him out cold. Floyd goes next, but she dispatches him with ease thanks to using some handcuffs as brass knucks. Clever. Before the others can have their turns now, however, Cody turns on his rescuer and forces him to lower their weapon at gunpoint, claiming they have to all work together towards the bigger threat at hand, which is both a good point and smart decision that thankfully they all agree with. This leads to everyone being freed, as well as the cops getting their firearms back. The sheriff informs the group that there are at least 4 alligators loose in the building, as the one inmate, Big Jim, shares his personal experience with these creatures, giving the others plenty of reasons to be afraid, and shutting down any ideas one of them may have had about facing the beast directly. So what's the plan at this point? Get to higher ground, a simple yet effective one for avoiding the floodwaters and gators. From there, they can hopefully get to the jet skis to be able to escape this nightmare. Let's hope they can make it that far. So, since the hallway is full of swimming apex predators, the group attempts to leave through the ceiling. After the sheriff gets up there off camera somehow, I'm guessing one of the inmates lifted her up. She lowers a sheet rope for the rest to follow. Things go well at first, until one of the alligators gets the door open by random chance when it attacks it and hits the door handle. Not sure why it was bashing the door to begin with, but I suppose we can suspend our disbelief a little further. Stamper notices the door opening and knocks out Floyd with the butt of his gun in order to use him as alligator bait so he can escape. Floyd somehow manages to recompose himself before he is eaten, however, and begins climbing to safety. So all is good? Well, not so much, as the man needs a hand making that final stretch and reaches to Jocks for help. But Jocks hasn't been enjoying Floyd's racist attitude thus far and lets him know this by accidentally letting him drop back down into the water below. The cops try to help the inmate by shooting at the gators, but they seem to be bulletproof. That, or maybe the police here just have stormtrooper levels of accuracy, as the creatures are entirely undeterred and quickly finish off Floyd's life sentence. As one of the other gators opens its mouth towards the ceiling, the deputy fires a round down its gaping maw, finally ending one of the creature's lives. But before they can celebrate their minor victory, one of the remaining alligators jumps all the way up to and through the hole in the ceiling, grabs the officer by his legs, and drags him back down to the depths below. Wow, did not see that coming. Well, our characters suffered quite a few losses, but they did manage to escape for now, and even took one of the threats out in the process. But could they have done better? Well, for starters, they all could have traveled in a group to the basement. This would have meant more guns and more eyes looking out for potential problems, which may have saved the female criminal's life. But whether she lives or dies, there's no reason the rest of the gun-toting crooks couldn't have blasted the rest of the alligators away. Especially while they were fully exposed and slowly climbing up the staircase. But okay, we missed that opportunity and alligators are now swimming through the hallways. What next? Well, I say we use the prison cells to our advantage in one of two different ways. Either we lock ourselves in for protection and fire away from between the bars until all of the gators are dead and gone, or we can go for a more pacifist approach and leave the cell next to ours open, followed by luring the alligators into it from the safety of our cage. Once they're inside, we lock them up and won't have to deal with them for the rest of our escape attempt. Just have to remember to send animal control through here once the storm is over. If we don't want to risk facing the alligators at all, however, we can just do the ceiling escape plan like they do in the film. Just maybe barricade that door before doing so with something like the desk in the room. And maybe send the police up first in order to maintain control over the situation. Wouldn't want one of the prisoners using this opportunity to steal a firearm and attempt to turn the tables here. After crawling through the ceiling for some time, they knock down a wooden panel to head out on the top floors. Apparently, these upper parts of the precinct haven't been used in years and look like they're still under construction. Our tax dollars at work, I guess. This explains why the building has such a horrible leaking problem, though. The gang now splits up, with the sheriff, Cody, and Jocks looking through the very top floor for anything useful, and the rest staying on the second floor to find things. Not a bad call with the amount of people they have and the dwindling ammo supply. At the sheriff's request, Cody now shares his life story and who these jailbreaking crooks are that invaded this place. They're all disgraced soldiers, himself included, that were let go from the army for one reason or another and turned to a life of crime afterwards when they weren't accepted back into society. Cody was the wheelman for a heist they were all doing where no one was supposed to get hurt, but he ran off with the cash by accident in a panic after Rafe and the rest murdered some officer. He stashed the money and tried to meet back up with the others but got caught and blamed for the murder, and thus ended up here. So he's not completely innocent, but at least he's no killer, and seems like the crooks only want him free to find that secret stash. After this heartfelt tale, a gator makes its way up a flooded shaft, and despite them opening fire on it, the creature still manages to attack Jocks. They continue to shoot, but nothing seems to stop this thing. The filmmakers do know that alligators aren't bulletproof, right? At this point, they even had me doubting rational thoughts, and now my Google history contains the question, can an alligator withstand a bullet? To which I discovered they may shrug off smaller rounds, but definitely not stop the bullet outright, and wouldn't be able to handle the semi-automatics and shotguns being used in this film. They do eventually take the gator out, but not before using up 100 rounds of ammo, and not before it's able to finish off Jocks. Rest in pieces, my friend. The group below hears the commotion on the floor above, and Angelo uses this distraction to grab a nearby handgun from an unfinished fire range. Not sure why it was left fully loaded and just lying around, but it sure is convenient for this inmate uprising. Jim tries to stop his fellow prisoner to not make the situation worse, but takes a bullet for his struggles as Angelo wrestles with the guard and beats him to a pulp. The crook, of course, does nothing during all of this, as it's not his fight. Fair enough, I guess, but you'd think he'd at least want to help maintain peace until everyone actually escapes this place. As Angelo celebrates his victory by seemingly finishing off Jim, the ceiling collapses from the alligator attack above, causing a stray steel rod to pierce the final jailbreaker through the chest. Talk about bad luck. Speaking of which, a random gator enters through the crawl space and takes out Angelo as well while he's distracted. Man, these characters are dropping like flies. As yet another gator enters the hallway now, Big Jim, who's still alive but bleeding out, offers to fight the beast so the other two can get away. A brave thing to do with your final breaths. He does Steve Irwin proud as he handles the creature quite well for a while, even toying with it, but eventually it gets the upper hand and removes his face. And of course, during all this, the pair just watched on in awe, even though Jim's sole purpose with this fighting was giving them a chance to escape, way to make his sacrifice completely pointless. They soon regret this decision as they're backed into a corner with an alligator slowly approaching, but are saved at the last minute by Rafe coming out of nowhere with a shotgun and blowing the beast to bits. But wait, how did he survive? Well, according to him, the gator that took him away thought he was dead and stored him for later consumption, giving him a chance to escape when it left. Even though in real life, gators don't actually exhibit this behavior. Geez, how hard is it to Google alligator facts, filmmakers? This time the shells actually work on this particular gator and the trio is safe once more, leaving just one more beast swimming around somewhere for them to face. The plan now is to get to the jet skis. I mean, I thought it always was. But Joe tells them to go on without her as she has a plan. And of course, she doesn't bother sharing that plan with anyone, and they just walk their separate ways. And what's this master plan of hers? Hiding in a room with the one remaining shotgun as gators gather outside the door. Not sure where she's going with this, but let's let her cook for now. Probably wasn't a good idea to let the two criminals go off on their own unsupervised though, as Rafe quickly points out when he suggests to Cody that they just dip now and leave Joe behind. Cody refuses to let another innocent person die, however, and even steals the jet ski keys to convince Rafe to stay. This of course starts a conflict between the two as they start to fight. As Rafe gets the upper hand, he begins to drown his former colleague. Wait, but I thought he needed him alive to get the location of the money. Well, maybe he just plans to wait for him to pass out and forcibly drag him out of the building afterwards. Who knows? Back upstairs, we finally get to see what the sheriff was waiting for, as all the remaining alligators gather outside her door for reasons. Don't know what could be drawing them there, but she launches her idea into action, which is to shoot the propane tanks near the creatures and take them out with a big fireball of an explosion. It not only works, but causes a massive explosion to run all throughout the building, taking out Rafe in the process and saving Cody's life. Wait, but she didn't know Rafe had turned on them, and if her plan could have potentially killed one of the others, why in the world wouldn't she have warned them of what she was attempting? The movie now just cuts to Joe and Cody on the jet skis during the aftermath the following morning. The whole town is flooded, but they made it out at least, and the sheriff tells her new friend that he's free to go. She will simply report him as a casualty from the whole incident. Wow, did he win her over easily, or what to convince an officer of the law to look the other way like this? She tells Cody he's free to go, she will report him as dead. How did he win her over that easily? They split up, with Cody presumably heading to get his stash of stolen money that a cop is letting him keep, and Sheriff Joe gets a free jet ski out of the whole situation. A happy ending, I guess. But was there anything they could have done to have a few more people survive? If the end goal was to always get to the jet skis, and they seem to be able to get to them no problem from the upper floors, they should have just made a beeline for them once the alligators were confirmed to have been on the upper levels with them and no longer on the lower ones guarding the escape vehicles. If we were waiting for a better time to leave, however, no time was better than when Jim was fighting for us to escape. Standing around and staring is useless. Either we should leave while he's giving us the chance, or at least help him fight to take out a threat. Better than hoping a previously killed off character comes back to save us thanks to the obscure plot reasons. And speaking of that guy, Rafe, if he wanted to leave the others behind, he could have just done so. If he wanted to make sure Cody comes with him and not abandon the sheriff, all he has to do is give her the second set of jet ski keys. There's no reason they have to carry both or leave together other than ensuring the other's safety, which they're not doing by separating to begin with. So just give her a set of keys, and Cody can either leave with Rafe or stick around for Joe. Everyone wins. No need to have a pointless fight or get blown up by propane. And on that note, I have to say the sheriff's plan was terrible. Propane tanks very rarely explode from gunshots, if ever. But that's an action movie trope, of course, and there could be a slim chance of it really happening, so we can suspend disbelief one final time for that. But why was the explosion so massive that it extended throughout the entire building? Were there tons of propane tanks on every level that all just happened to be set off in a chain reaction to this? Because if the movie is saying that was all from a single tank explosion, not only is that a load of hogwash, but the sheriff almost certainly wouldn't have survived it herself. And why was she doing this to begin with? They have a way out, and escape vehicles that are no longer guarded. Just leave. The alligators aren't going to hunt us down to the ends of the earth. And even if we wanted to ensure that any and all threats were taken out before we escape, this is a pretty crappy way of doing that, as we see Cody survive no problem by just being under the water. And where would any other alligators not on the upper floors likely be residing during this event? Exactly. So overall, the threat was beaten, but with a little more cooperation, awareness, and preparation, we could have saved a few extra lives and kept some criminals in the clink. So stock up and stick together, because you never know when you may have to deal with problems yourself. And when it rains, it pours. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, guys. Binge another one and peace out.